All right, hello everyone. My name is Ryan McLean. I'm the town administrator here in Carlisle. I'm
Aubrey Thomas, the assistant town administrator, who's probably emailed you a lot.
all right, and we'd love to have everyone in the room introduce themselves and then in their roles, and then everyone online as well. Start here. I caught you in shop.
Peter Yakutis, I'm volunteering at Council on Aging.
And my name is Bill Luther, and I'm volunteering in the Council of Aging and the Affordable Housing Trust.
Catherine Luther, and I'm hoping to join the Council of Aging and a few others.
Is this a coincidence, family, or power couple?
Coincidence. Just happens to live with me.
Susan Provenzano, I'm chair of LSC, vice chair of LSC, Land Stewardship Committee.
Chris Finney, I'm a member of the Land Stewardship Committee.
Glenn Reed, co-chair of the Environmental Sustainability Committee. I'm also on the Safety Committee.
Eric Follis, former co-chair of the Environmental Sustainability Committee and currently a member also of the Municipal Facilities Committee.
Sylvia Willard, applied for a couple of positions.
Reformed municipal employee.
And I'm Barney Arnold and a member of the select board.
All right, let's go online. We'll start with John.
John Ballantyne, a member of the Council on Aging and Human Services, co-chair of the Housing Trust, longtime volunteer.
All right, Steve.
Steve Tobin, Chair of the Trails Committee.
Stacy.
Stacy Lennon, member of the Planning Board.
Kyle.
Kyle Rogers, I just joined the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Excellent. The Cynthia Soren.
Cynthia Soren with the Carlisle Mosquito.
And Sharon.
Good afternoon, Sharon Wood, Vice Chair of the Carlisle School Committee.
Excellent. Christina.
Christina Chrysotolopoulos, co-chair of the Environmental Sustainability Committee.
I'm assuming since Chris is here, that's Suzanne.
Yes, Suzanne Spinney, Chair of the Police Station Building Renovation Committee.
Excellent. Another accidental power company. And we are joined, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, I'm late. Brian Murphy from Conscom LSC and crack. Sorry, bro.
Super volunteer. Everybody online can hear okay?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
I think you might have missed Sarah Smith.
Oh, did I? I can only see.
Yeah, sorry.
I am here, Sarah Cassidy Smith, chair of the Planning Board, and apologize I don't have my video on, just trying to eat some dinner.
Hi, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, welcome everybody. This is meant to be instructive. We have a course of instruction for you. But if you came with questions or want to stop in, we very much encourage that interactiveness, and there will be a test. All right, here's our agenda. I'm going to go over the structure of the town, which is usually pretty interesting to people. I'm going to talk about the town budget and town meeting. Then we're going to pivot over to volunteer and chair roles and responsibilities, talk about open meeting law and ethics. Select board recommendations for managing staff, the appointment and resignation process for any of you who feel like you've made a mistake after this class. We talk about finance, some of our tech here in the building, and then access to the building. So things you don't think about until you have to run a meeting and there's no staff here to help. All right, I'm going to try to click. So first I want to talk about the structure of the town and where the authority for the town comes from. I find this to be a good base for people to understand where their authority comes from in their particular boards and committees. So if you want to click the Massachusetts Constitution.
Let me reshare.
A lot of you are very educated, so I'd like to give you the reference points and the sources for the material we're going to talk about. So as we're talking about, I'll talk about the Massachusetts Constitution. So written by mostly John Adams, as many of you know. If you go down to Article 2, just scroll down, it's right here.
Article 2.
No, that's the God section. I actually wrote it in the PowerPoint, which was it? It is Article 2. Back to the Constitution. I'm just going to talk about the Constitution. So the Constitution written by John Adams is older than the United States Constitution. And if you look at the Massachusetts Constitution, it's very similar. Very similar in construction. One of the reasons why Massachusetts leads the nation in education is the Constitution specifically calls out education as a priority of the people. Many states do not have that in their constitution, and the power that is vested in school boards, especially local school boards, and the reason why most towns have more than 60% of their funding going to education, I do believe does come from the structure of the Massachusetts Constitution calling out education specifically. But the Constitution says that the state the Commonwealth can incorporate and empower cities and towns to do anything that is not specifically denied in the Constitution. And then it gives power to the general court, which is the Senate and the House of Representatives, to make laws to govern based off the Constitution at the state level. And it does not grant cities and towns any power that is not given in the Mass General Law, which we'll get to. So why do you care about that? The authority for many of the volunteer positions in town come from the Massachusetts general laws. The town can pass a law, and recently did, which we'll get to, the town administrator bylaw that does supersede Mass General Law. So the town had to adopt it and add it as a Mass General Law in order for it to take place. And that'll make more sense to you in a second. But a lot of the stuff that we say you have to do is because of this structure. So the Massachusetts General Law codifies the Constitution. Chapter 40 in particular lays out the power of cities and towns. If it's not in that document or it's not in that law, the town has the ability to do that. And I'll give you one recent example from this week. We had someone complain about their neighbors causing too much noise. So the Constitution and the Mass General Law does not say anything about the power of cities and towns to legislate noise. So you can pass a bylaw as a town that says we do or do not allow this noise to exist. As long as it doesn't infringe on anyone's constitutional rights, you can pass a bylaw without the state saying that this is the noise law or this is. But the Constitution and Mass General Law states that the local board of health has the authority to govern public health. So if you were to infringe on that with a bylaw by saying we deny the right of the Board of Health to enforce the mask law, say during COVID, that would be illegal, and you would need to petition the general court to change that. So many of the things we say that you can or cannot do, or town council says you can or cannot do, come from this relationship between the Constitution, the Mass General Law, and then everything else which cities and towns are allowed to do. Did I lose anybody there? My civics?
Well, I just want to know if you passed that law about the noise.
So Carlisle has a noise law for contractors, and it has a noise law for roosters.
For what?
Roosters.
Oh, they passed the law for roosters.
Yes.
That poor fireman.
Roosters are very governed here in Carlisle, but you'll notice that it does not have any ability to regulate for the town to regulate someone's noise that they make on their property.
So it's not somebody's noise, but it is contractors showing up too early in the morning and making noise. Or too late, it's, specific days too, right?
So we can say we have a bylaw for that, and you can't do it. Otherwise, we have to go to the Department of Environmental Protection, and they need to bring a noise meter and prove that it's a public health violation, your noise complaint.
So I lived in Cohasset where we had a bylaw, a noise bylaw, and literally a doctor could write a letter that says that the neighbor can't build their house because it's disturbing your medical needs.
Oh my.
And it was really problematic, but I'm glad we don't have that here. But just as an example, that's what other towns have for bylaw.
Wow.
So people come to us a lot and they say, it's usually my neighbor is a problem and I'd like you to do something about it. We have to find an authority in order to do something about it. And sometimes that authority is you. So we bring them to you. We say, deal with this person.
John has a question.
I
Okay.
think we also have a dog barking bylaw. I think 15 minutes.
Oh, right, the dog barking.
Yeah. No, I don't.
No, that's a mass general law.
Oh, it's a mass general law.
I thought we passed something in Carlisle, couldn't be more than 15 minutes or something.
If we did, I'll look that up.
Anyway.
So the point of this was to kind of show you where things come from. And that's not magic, that it does exist in some document. And the power of your staff, myself, Aubrey, and others, is to help you interpret these various bylaws and regulations. Now, why is it this complicated? You're not going to believe this, but people who come to my office don't agree all the time. So one person will sit in a chair and they'll say, everybody believes this and you should do this. I don't actually have that authority, but we talk about it. And then they leave, and then a person comes and sits in the chair, the very next person, and they say the exact opposite of what that person said. And both of them are like, don't you agree we should do something? That's not my job to agree or not to agree. My job is to facilitate that conversation so that those two people don't duel in the street. Right? That's why government was created. So we are the middle person and often the person that people blame, and that's exactly where we want to be. So if two neighbors are disputing, we are the referee. That's it. And the referee comes from the laws that you have passed and established. So one of my favorite lines for people is, I would be happy to enact your particular bylaw, but you need to go to town meeting and argue it amongst your friends and neighbors first. And if they all agree, then we'd be happy to enforce it. Otherwise, I can't.
So you don't have like an arbitration process?
Depends on the situation. So government is just neighbors agreeing to how they're going to agree or not. And that takes us to town bylaws. So as I said earlier, the town can pass any bylaw it wants as long as it doesn't infringe on the US Constitution, the state law, or the state constitution. And you have passed many of these. So if it is a bylaw that undoes something that the state has said is their power, then you have to petition the state to allow you to change it. And the greatest example of that is town meeting. So you're allowed to have an open town meeting. Any town can have an open town meeting. If you want to have a representative town meeting or a council manager form of government, then you would need, especially Carlisle, because of your population, you need to petition the state in order to do that, because the state does not allow that in a smaller town. And the reason for that is they don't want 200 of you to gather together and to create a monopoly that would change the way that everybody else lives. So it has to go through a process in order to change the government structure. That's a pretty extreme example. A lot of the bylaws are what committee can or cannot exist, what that committee does, how it has any power or influence in town. And that's where some of you come from. You volunteered for these various boards that the town said should or should not exist. Pretty cool, right? It's my entire life. All right, so those are the town bylaws. Then appointing boards. So this is very interesting. Every department that you know of may or may not have existed for all of time, right? The ones that do actually exist are the select board has existed since the beginning. And anything that has to do with finances had some type of mechanism. And then policing or securities had some type of mechanism. But DPWs, the things that you're very, very used to have evolved over time as towns have needed them. So when neighbors could no longer agree on going to town meeting and say, we're going to pay $10,000 to fix this road, they created DPWs and other things to help facilitate those shared spaces in that shared land. So as that existed, the state law passed various mechanisms for town to say, you can adopt this for, say, conservation, like a conservation commission or a council on aging. If you want to have a council on aging, you can agree to this mass general law. And because we've already created this law, you can create this body that has these powers. Right? In many of those situations, the state said that board can then hire or fire people for their needs. And Carlisle is a very, or was until recently, a very decentralized town, meaning each board and committee had general powers based off mass general law to do the HR and management of the various employees. This has been discussed in Carlisle for a while. There was a personnel board at one point that tried to organize this. Then you had a government study committee that suggested that my position should have more authority in human resources. End up hiring a human resources director because of the complexity of the law. And most recently at town meeting, you passed a town administrator bylaw that specifically lays out who is managed by who. And we'll get to this, this idea of who appoints who when we get to the town structure. And I'll show you how it's still a little complicated. Why do you care about that? As a volunteer board, you're gonna say one day to me, my staff member is great and they deserve a raise or more money. Or you might say, my staff member is not great and we need to get rid of them. And there are processes for both. We do more of the first one, rewarding our great employees because we have it. But when you have a problem, you're gonna want help. Because you're not an HR manager and you don't fully know HR law unless you do that in your personal time or your professional career. And we'll talk about that when we get to the structure, which we're gonna do now. So some documents that you should know as a volunteer about the town structure. So first, the town website. Every department is asked to manage their, so if you scroll over departments without clicking, you'll see these are all of the staff departments in town. And then boards and committees have various levels of staff. You hover over boards and committees. Here are all of you in the way that you exist. In each one of these pages, you have, if there's staff members, contact information, the charter, and then in many cases, relevant documents. We are asking each board and committee to review those to make sure that they're up to date and consistent with what that board or committee thinks. One of the great things is this, and I'll get to this in a second, the select board might create you as a committee. And then 30 years later, that committee has decided its function and the town has said that this function is necessary and it may have lost that original charter. You every once in a while need to review those charters and make sure that everybody understands where everybody lives in the hierarchy. The town website is a great place to check out your committee and other committees that are relevant to you to find information. On my page in particular, if you go to departments, town administrator, I've tried to collect the things that most people care about. So town policies, the bylaws, information about the budget, our road maintenance plans and complaints, which is the most used link on my page. Okay, right there, complaints. So we have a complaint process and a lot of this is being automated. So these automatic forms will go directly to whoever needs to action them so that we can be more responsive. Going back to the presentation. Okay, we talked about bylaws. You can view them through my page or the town clerk's page also has a link to the bylaws. If we click policies and procedures, so we talked about, I love the layers of government. So Massachusetts Constitution, right? Only superseded by the federal Constitution. Then you get to the Mass General laws, then you get to the bylaws, and those things that aren't covered by that are now covered by the town's policies and procedures, which are approved by the select board. Okay, so here are all of our financial policies, which we are proud to say we completed recently. Some of the licensing and food management that's done by the select board. Of course, the Board of Health has their own stuff there. Some legal and administrative items like who can use town council or who can serve as a special municipal employee. And then governance. So the most used policy that I do on a day-to-day basis is sign management in town. So if you've driven through the Rotary or on School Street, seeing the banners that go over, or anybody stuck anything in the ground that would be considered common land, we deal with that. And it's pretty interesting and it gets heated, believe it or not. It is the thing that I deal with the most, signs. Who can hold them? Who can put what's on the signs? Who's it's offended? Who it's not offended and who it's helping, all the different things. But we're happy to help with that. And many of the arguments mimic all the stuff you see in the news as government is dealing with it. All right, back to the PowerPoint, the master plan. So right now the town is being guided by a master plan, which if you go to other towns, maybe we didn't pay that bill. If you go to other towns, they have master plans as well. I will tell you Carlisle's is one of the most comprehensive, most inclusive meaning most resident input. A lot of times the planning board will just pass a master plan. You can get a consultant and they'll call it done. Yours, Carlisle's, was done with a lot of thought. So while it's not a completely agreed upon document, it is certainly a guide. Almost 100 recommendations for the next 10 to 20 years of Carlisle's future. We have proudly worked through about a third of it. Those recommendations, with many of the other 2/3 well on their way. And then if you want information or you want to share information to others or to help other people find information about the town, we have all the socials: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Aubrey posts regularly on City in the Woods. We do not respond on City in the Woods or engage. We just post information. We do not want it to get into legal disputes and things like that. So we have an agreement with City in the Woods that we just say, this is something the town would like to tell you. And then whether or not that's shared or commented on is up to the residents. It was a big deal to get on City in the Woods, so we had to figure that out with all of the legal requirements. And then the website is an automatic function where if you sign up for notifications, subscriptions, you get them from us. We try to post all of the relevant things like tax bills are due, dog licensing, elections, and town meeting, all on the website. All right, next slide, please. All right, so here is the structure of the town. So these are your elected boards, the dark green. You have the select board, the moderator. I'm like right in the online people space here. Board of Assessors, Board of Health, the trustees, and the 2 school committees. Down here, it gets a little confusing, but the non-elected boards have come from various things. So I told you before, adopted mass general laws include the Council on Aging, Cultural Council, Conservation Commission, Finance Committee, Rec Committee, and the Youth Commission. And then anything that's underneath another one is a subcommittee. So the land stewards are a subcommittee of the Conservation Commission. The select board also has many advisory committees that come or are structured from mass general law or need to exist because of mass general law. That includes the Housing Trust, the Ag Committee, the Board of Registrars, the CPC, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Historical Commission. And then they've created some that exist in that gray area between mass general law and what the town needs. And that includes the MFC, the TSAC, the Transfer Station Action Committee, and the 2 most recent ones are the Cemetery Committee and the Safety Committee. For land use, the Select Board has an advisory committee, the ESC, the Sustainability Committee, and then the CONSCOM has some advisory committees, CRAC, which was mentioned earlier, and Trails. And lastly, the ones in red are just under review, whether or not they're going to stay. And then Celebrations and Veterans Committee isn't its actual name. You just have to go to town meeting and change its name because it's in the bylaw. So town meeting has to say that we can do that. So that's where everything lives.
The Lime, is that somebody suggesting that for Lime Committee?
It's just, it exists, it's on the books, but it just hasn't done anything in a while.
Okay.
We're kind of poking it, see if it's still alive.
Well, yeah, I was concerned about the water quality. I know that's a big issue in town.
Yes. So a lot of committees are real active for a while and they kind of dissipate. Want to review their charters. And then a lot of people have ideas for committees, but we try to steer them or change a charter so they're not creating new committees. Volunteerism is high in Carlisle, but you can imagine there's a lot of vacancies.
Is this a large amount of committees for a town this small?
It is. Carlisle loves a committee. Not as much as Concord. But Carlisle loves a committee.
Okay.
So that comes from something. It comes from the town did not have a lot of staff for a very long time. So the townsfolk would get together and they would solve a problem using a volunteer board who was volunteering their time in order to do something.
Right.
Many of those committees end up becoming quasi-staff.
Yeah.
So then when you started to layer on more staff to professionalize things, they became more complicated. There's some conflict between those boards and committees that were acting as quasi departments, and others are no longer necessary. So as your Board of Health professionalizes and expands, you need less deer committees, tick committees, or it's a one-time issue that needed a lot of attention. All right, so Carlisle has a very flat hierarchy. This is the staff. So what I've tried to do here is, can you do the next slide? Back. Back one. Okay. So what I wanted to do was show you the current, go one more slide down.
This,
No, the staff one. Thank you. All right, so what I was trying to show was how it exists now and how it'll exist now that the town administrator bylaw is in place. So the town administrator bylaw did a lot of work to define who works for who appoints who can fire who can discipline who, all important things when you need it to be important, but maybe scary in some sense when it's not as relevant. Okay, so anybody in red is appointed directly by the select board. So that's the police chief, the fire chief, the treasurer collector, the town clerk, myself, and town council. Anybody in green is appointed by me or the town administrator's position. So that's essentially everybody else except for what we're calling independent boards and committees. So the schools by constitution are governed by their own elected officials, usually through a version of my position called the superintendent. The library trustees remain directly controlled. The library staff remains directly controlled by the library trustees. And the Board of Health, because of an amendment at town meeting, retained their authority over their employees. So you see that all in yellow. Okay, everybody else is either appointed by myself or the select board. So the key check on me is the select board. They have full authority on me. And then the fire is interesting because you pass something called the strong chief law for fire. So the select board hires and fires and manages the fire chief, but the fire chief has full authority over anybody fire. So the select board doesn't appoint one of the called volunteer firefighters or officers. That is the fire chief, but they hire the fire chief. So there's that control. The reason for that is usually a town passes strong chief law when they have some complication that requires specialized understanding of hiring and firing. Here would be your volunteer department. So passing the strong chief law many decades ago was probably to make sure that you can still have a fire department even during a budget crisis. I'm guessing if I read the literature. So is there any questions on any of this? It's extremely confusing.
Is the fire department, the fire chief is an employee
Yes.
of the town, but all the whole fire department staff is volunteer.
Yes, they're really call, so they're paid call appointed firefighters, but not full time.
But is there discussion about that becoming full-time or paid?
There may be a point where you don't have enough volunteers to have a call department, but the select board currently, the finance committee, fire chief have said as long as it can remain call, they would like it to. It's probably $1 million a year difference. But it's getting harder and harder to retain people who want to do that and who can live here.
Yeah,
Given the wages.
I've talked to a couple of them, and the concern is getting older and health and stuff.
But for a couple hundred years, it's worked. We're hoping that it can last a couple hundred more. But you might see some type of hybridization. So a couple full-time staff managing more beefed up part-time staff, or a lot of towns our size do a hybrid model where you have 4 or 5 professional staff and then a slew of call underneath.
No, the big concern is, I mean, have we almost doubled in size in the last couple decade in terms of housing and what we have here?
So we could do a whole class on fire, but the primary concern is everybody else around us has hydrants and we are non-hydrant community. So there's no one who can help us
Really?
in a situation. So our department is very specialized and we need a lot of person power in order to fight fires. Because you have to bring water from the source, and picture some of the driveways in Carlisle, just to get water from the bottom to the top is its own department.
That's scary.
It's true. It keeps me up at night. I'm trying to smile while I'm saying something.
So they tap into the wells of the houses.
They try to use cisterns, fire ponds, and one of the reasons why we have so many fire trucks is you got to bring a lot of water to a fire when you don't have water. So they might hook up 4 trucks, whereas Boston would bring 1 pumper and hook into a hydrant and have all the water they need.
No.
So it's a very different way of fighting fires.
Mhm.
So when we call Chelmsford, they're like, we're here.
Yeah.
Can't help you much with your water delivery, but
Yeah.
on the buildings, things like that. It's difficult. All right, so these green bubbles up here are elected staff who have either direct authority or advisory authority over those hires. So in the bylaw, the town administrator bylaw, I have to ask and coordinate with the historical commission in order to manage the part-time hours for the historical commission with the assistant town clerk. We're kind of working on defining what that means to advise the council. But I will tell you this, I would never hire anyone without talking to the people, hire, fire, or discipline anyone without talking to the people that are involved. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have a town administrator who just doesn't coordinate with the rest of the party, you should not have that person be their town administrator in this type of town. It would not work. You need collaboration. All right, next slide, please. Okay, I'm gonna do my part here and turn it over. So we'll talk about the town budget and process. So first of all, the budget process starts now, believe it or not. If you want to click on budget process. The finance committee right now is working through financial forecasting. So what is the town budget going to look like in 5 years? And then we'll go into a capital planning model, which is what do we expect the town to spend on capital in the next 5 years? That will inform the part of the budget that most people understand, which is the operational budget, or what's voted at town meeting. So they will use the data from that forecasting and that look forward to send information to the departments. The departments will then send their budgets informed to the finance committee. It's assembled by me and then discussed for several months before it gets to town meeting. The most common complaint at town meeting about the budget is it feels like it's already done. Well, it's because it's been worked on for 7 months and we have 7 minutes to present it to the town. So it's extremely complicated. It's based on a lot of factors. They're all understandable if you have time, but in 7 minutes, you're just given the highlights. So I understand that complaint that people feel like it's already baked. There's not a lot of decision making. In 1805, the budget came and it was discussed for hours and hours as you decided whether or not to buy trucks and ladders and different things. But it's become very complicated. I think that's all we need here. So that if you click the budget book, this one. So we put this together for people to understand the budget. It's a pretty deep analysis, and then if you go all the way to the bottom of the document, we have the actual line by line, and then these last 2 pages are the capital plan. The 5-year capital plan. So you can see there's a lot that's discussed. You got to figure out how to afford all of it without you rioting and firing. Okay, so there's like a whole class on this, but we just wanted to show you where it comes from. And it lives on my town administrator page on the budget information if you want to dig in. Okay, back to the slide. Capital planning is extremely important. So even if you're a committee that doesn't deal exclusively with the budget, like trails or something like that, you do have capital that you are projecting over the next 5 years, and we really want to capture all that. So if you're in a meeting and someone's saying we need a council on aging van, we're going to buy that in 2 years, you don't see it on a capital plan, you should tell someone, hey, we should get that on a plan. Because what happens is during the budget cycle, that shows up and it feels like it's out of nowhere, that someone just wants this wish list. And maybe that board or committee's been talking about it for 10 years and they know all about it, but the finance committee doesn't. And then it causes conflict, or it gets deprioritized, which we don't want. So getting it in the planning cycle is key. And then come March, April, we finalize the budget. It turns into warrant articles at town meeting after heavy vetting from the finance committee and horse trading with the select board. And it goes to annual town meeting. So if you want to click that one. For those of you who didn't go this year, there was a food truck, so you missed out. It was short, 6.5 hours. Scroll down, please. So then each part of the budget becomes its own warrant article. And in recent years, we have added tons of information, podcasts, videos, trying to explain each part of it. Here's a great example of Mass General Law. It says you have to vote specifically on elected officials' salaries. So the moderator and the assessors make $50 and $100 a year respectively, and that has to be its own vote at town meeting because of the Mass General Law. If their salaries were zero, you would not have that article. You wouldn't need it. But it's also in the operating budget, so it's confusing. It's double voted, which drives the accountant nuts. Okay, so generally, if you go to the next slide, Aubrey, please. Generally, all of the financial matters and anything related to money is done in the annual town meeting, which is somewhere between April and May, March really in May. There's a reason for this. The fiscal year closes on June 30th. And then we have to close the books and set the tax rate, which is based off all the stuff you passed in the spring, in the fall. So if you make a lot of decisions in the fall, it can mess up the tax rate process and can get confusing, especially if it's not passed. So the real reason for doing most of the financial stuff in the spring is so that you can have a smooth tax rate process. Everybody likes to pay taxes on time, so we like that to go smoothly. Fall town meeting is really a special town meeting. The town clerk would get mad at me for calling it a fall town meeting, but that's when it happens in the fall. Is a special town meeting where you deal with bylaws and other things. The reason for that is bylaw discussions like the MBTA might take hours and hours, and you do need to pass a budget, whereas bylaws are considered not necessarily necessary except the MBTA, so I don't want to confuse you. So you'd want that discussion to be on its own. Otherwise, you might have a huge MBTA fight in the middle of like buying a fire truck, passing the budget. The warrant is the advertisement for what's going to be discussed at town meeting, and then the motions at town meeting are what's actually legally binding. But you can't advertise an article in the warrant and send it to the townsfolk and then substantially change it at town meeting. Because the theory is you read the ad, you're like, that's not that important to me. I'm not going to go to town meeting. And then the town meeting changes that ad, then you were not properly informed. Okay, so that's why that exists. And the moderator keeps yelling at you folks, boards and committees, to be involved if possible in town meetings. So if you have a part in town meeting, the moderator does expect you to. Moderators, by the way, for those who don't know, are in charge of town meeting. That's their function. And he gets mad at you if you're not involved. Next slide. So any questions on structure of budget? That's like an 18-month master's degree in 30 minutes.
Ryan, where do the rules and regulations fit in, you know, in that master? You know, we have the laws and the bylaws, and say we have like a rule for flying drones or something. Is that those rules and regulations like covered by one of those bylaws?
So the answer to everything is town can do it as long as it doesn't exist somewhere else.
Right.
So anything that town passes means that the federal and state don't have anything to say about it. The town can pass it. So there's two things you could do. You can have a policy, which can change meeting to meeting, as you know.
Mhm.
Or you can pass a bylaw, which requires town meeting vote. So the difference is how hard it is to undo it. So regulation or policy can be passed by any board as long as they have the jurisdiction, but it can also be undone by any board like the next day or 48 hours later, which you'll learn about. A bylaw would have to go to town meeting to change.
So the you know, the rules and regulations we say for using town land would be part of policy.
Yes, unless you pass a bylaw. Right. Yeah. So people don't like passing bylaws because it really binds you.
Okay.
For example, the land stewards, which you're part of, are a vote away from existing or not. If they're a subcommittee of the CONSCOM, so CONSCOM would say we don't need the land stewards anymore. But if it was in a bylaw that the land stewards must control the land, then you'd have to ask town meeting to do that. Question. in most of our day, like we're looking this stuff up, we don't know it off the top of our head either. We just kind of know a lot to get it done quickly, but it's a lot. There's a lot to know, which is why you layered on more and more staff. It's getting more and more complicated.
Alright.
Yourself.
So, already introduced myself, Barbara Thomas, Assistant Town Administrator. So, I'm one of the point people for volunteers. Gretchen Gallimore, the Executive Assistant, is also a point person, as well as the Town Clerk, Ashley Cody. And so she's, started earlier this year, or no, in December actually. And so she's been a fantastic resource. So for those of you who haven't been, volunteers in town, you know, you should be meeting regularly with your board, vote and advise. There's a handbook that the town clerk can provide. Making sure you understand what is the authority that your board has, and making sure that you are working within those parameters. If you have any questions about that, I can look into it. Gretchen can look into it, and so can Ashley. You know, as Ryan mentioned about the charter, that also helps guide that. You know, and you know, if you were created by, let's say, the select board, then you are, you know, they are your authority to go to with any issues. And so, as a chair, for those who are new to being a chair, if there's any sort of resignation, please notify the town clerk. Appointment process, I'll talk about in a little bit. Make sure when you need to post an agenda, notify a town clerk as soon as possible. So if there's any urgent changes needed or anything, we can try to do that, because it has to have that 48 hours in advance. We can't really change the agenda generally within those 48 hours. Making sure that all of your new members have all done the proper training, which the town clerk will provide.
Aubrey, just
Sure.
to clarify, let me ask you, so the 48 hours,
Mhm.
is that business days, or is it include the
Thank you for
weekend?
asking. It does not include the weekend or holidays. So make sure that when you're looking at that, if there's a Monday holiday, you have to take that into account. So glad you asked that. So it's 48 business hours. One of the most important things that come up is the open meeting law. So it applies to everybody. And what does that mean? So first of all, you should be getting these education materials from the town clerk when you have started, and if you haven't received that, let us know. There's a lot of materials the town clerk can provide. It's also on the website. And so we, just like I said, we have to post at least 48 business hours before the meeting. You have to submit it to the town clerk's office to post. It's very limited exceptions. It's a crisis, right? Like, I think there was, some sort of health emergency. The Board of Health might have to meet, because they have to make a decision right now, right? There's something. So it's very limited. Every meeting needs to have meeting minutes that are submitted and approved and then posted on the town website. You should have those minutes done within the next 3 meetings or 30 days, whichever's longer, which does help a little bit. But all documents and exhibits that were discussed at that meeting are public records. So it's good to have those to be able to provide if people request. And the town clerk's office can give you agenda minute style guide to make sure that you're meeting all the necessary requirements for public record. One of the questions we still get a lot is, well, is it a meeting, right? You know, we called ourselves a working group. Well, that doesn't make a difference, right? Are you deliberating an informed amount of folks from your committee? Then yes, that is a meeting. There's very limited exceptions to this law. You can have executive session, but usually you probably can't. There's only 10 reasons going to executive session. So what is deliberation? It's not just talking in person. It's not just email. It could be trying to work on a shared document where you're making edits and comments to each other. One of the things I want to note with the City in the Woods is, if you are a committee member and you feel compelled to answer to a question because I can't, right? Making sure that if you're in the same thread as other committee members, you might be deliberating, right? So if somebody answers and then another one answers and then another one answers, you might be making quorum in that thread, so just have to be mindful of that, in any sort of, communication to make sure you're not all replying. What we did when I posted basically daily for each article that was going to town meeting in the spring was there were a couple financial questions, so the finance committee chair responded, and that was it. That was the response, so not everybody in the finance committee going back and forth interpreting the answers. There's very few things that don't count, right? If there's only a couple people that want to talk, distributing agendas, scheduling for the next meeting. And if you want to send a report to your board or committee, nobody can't be replying all, right? You can't be replying with comments. You just are submitting information for them for the next meeting. You can't discuss it. Again, there are some exceptions, let's say you went to a site visit. We do recommend you still make it a public meeting just because, you might have some questions. For example, the select board had a site visit to the Westford Fire Station to review that, as they determine, next steps for our fire station. So that was a public meeting. So that was good to just, so they didn't feel like they couldn't even ask a question or anything. If you attend an event but no deliberation, sometimes there's a public event, say Memorial Day or something, and you're all happen to be there. If you're attending another public meeting, but there's no deliberation. Quasi judicial boards this is new, and I'm not a town clerk, so I'm not sure exactly what that means, so. And then town meetings because different laws apply. Again, as I mentioned, there are only 10 specific purposes. I will send these slides, so all of these links will be involved. They're very specific, so I don't think the town clerk would move forward with an executive session agenda unless you know that it's actually appropriate. But if you have any questions, you can ask any one of us. If you do go into executive session, you need to make sure to follow these procedures that you're stating the reason, and then you close into executive session. So I touched this a little bit about file station sharing and collaboration. You should really make a public meeting if you're going to collaborate on any sort of file sharing. That it comes up a lot still. I know it gets a little murky, but you need to be careful because it's a form of communication. So you need to be careful of how you're sharing files and editing files.
I'm sorry, can you say more about that? Because I'm a little confused.
Sure. So let's say you wanted to update a policy document. You wouldn't want to be all in Google editing that same document at the same time, making notes, because now you are deliberating about a policy outside of public meeting. So that can be a difficult. It's difficult because it makes everything take longer, right? So I think it's not efficient, but it ensures that you're still doing everything public meeting. Christina, I saw your hand raised.
Hi. So my understanding from a previous session is that if we share a document with members and the members respond with comments only to the author, who just collates the comments in a red line document that then gets discussed in the next open meeting, is that acceptable?
Yes, that is. So that's a good example. Let's say your committee where one member does the meeting minutes and they submit it out before the meeting. Hey, I have the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Folks respond back with edits. Then they can go to that meeting and say, hey, this is what I received as comments. So that's a good point, that you just have to make sure that you're not going back and forth as a committee in an email change, and just make sure to only reply to that sender with any questions. But yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks.
So about and Barney kind of caught us last night. We had an abutter who had issues with something we were doing and gave us a list of their concerns. And I edited a document to express those concerns. And no offense to you, Barney. And Barney said, wait, you can't, that's almost like deliberating, because you're taking that person's comments and including them into a document, or trying to appease them. But it wasn't a public forum. Maybe there were other people who didn't send in their comments. So they weren't incorporated in the document. So that needs to be done in a public forum. Does that make sense to you? What I'm
I
saying?
think so. I don't have enough context to know the exact situation, but
But
yeah,
basically, in a butter says, I don't like A, B, and C. Can you change those? And I changed them, but I don't know that another abutter didn't want C, D, and F.
oh, so you change the document in response to somebody, but outside of approval from the committee to actually do that.
Right, but only as a draft, and then the committee would have to vote on it, but her point was, and I agree, that we shouldn't take, I mean, even though that abutters complaints or issues were raised in a public forum, I privately edited them to try to satisfy the abutter, but I didn't put out the word to the world to say, anybody else have anything to say?
That's a good point. So the select board equivalent would be, when we have some sort of document, they say in the meeting what will be changed, right? So then it's public to know like what's going to be changed. So you do have to be careful of, what you're doing on behalf of the committee as well, especially, and not changing something in between meetings.
I mean, we made the changes and we're going to present them in fact tonight, but we're going to, but maybe we shouldn't, because we shouldn't just take the input of whoever speaks the loudest. We should make sure it's public input.
And I'd be happy to talk more because I think I need a little more context.
Okay.
But yeah. Just so nice update, remote meetings. They keep pushing the deadline, that started because of the pandemic. That you're allowed to have remote meetings. You don't have to have a quorum in person, but you do have to do a roll call vote or votes and attendance to show that you're there. But they've extended it to 2027, so they just keep pushing it, which is a good thing. It makes it more accessible. And it makes it a lot easier, and more and more committees, as most of you know, are going hybrid. So it makes it just so you can come in person or you can go on Zoom, and it makes it a lot.
So are you saying when we announce our meeting, if people are remote, we need a roll call vote of who's in attendance?
Your members just need to do it.
And whether they're remote or in person?
No,
You just do a roll call.
yeah, the chair typically would, like a roll call now of everyone from the committee who's in attendance. And then I would say, Arnold, here, you go through your members. And similarly, every time you vote on something, if you have a mixture of members that are online and members that are in person, you have to do it has to be a roll call vote. So person by person, they indicate their yay or nay on the motion.
Sure.
Years ago, before Zoom, when we had only in-person meetings, anybody that came to the Conservation Commission signed on an attendance list. Remember that? So, I'm not sure we can do that now.
It's up to the person taking the minutes and record who's there.
We usually request anybody from the public to put their name into the chat with their student address, so we have a record. Is that necessary or just?
It's
good
not
practice?
necessary, but if like Barney said, if that's something that you put into the notes, then.
And as someone who was a secretary in a different committee, that's very helpful, because if you have people remote, like just where it says just Sharon there,
Mhm.
unless you, say, who are you?
It's Sharon.
Yeah. It helps.
Right, especially if they talk and then you can't.
Yeah.
So thank you, yeah. So public records, everything you create as a public body member is a public record. I will say that a lot of folks were very receptive to last year's training when we noted that your email that you use for your volunteer work, it can be public record. So a lot of folks since then have created their own separate email just for their board or committee involvement. So then, it's all going there. And so if you do that, let me know, because I keep a list of all the chairs to email when I, for newsletter updates or any other updates that I need to let you know, so then I can make sure that. email, so I'm not emailing to your other address, so you're not having to worry about public record. Is there any questions with that? All right. So this is from the town clerk. You know, if you get a public records request, that is not, you don't have to manage that. I'll let the town clerk know and they will give you the instructions on what to do next. So just going into ethics real quick, most of you have already finished the conflict of interest law training. It gets a little confusing. So every 2 years, so it's every 2 years for the actual video training that you go through from the state. But annually, you have to acknowledge that you have read the summary of the conflict of interest law. So a lot of folks have emailed saying, well, I thought I already did this, and it's a little confusing because you'll get an email from the state saying, hey, you have to do this again. And it's just literally you read it and then just say, you know, you just have to click your acknowledge. So you don't have to do the video every year, just the acknowledgement every year.
The acknowledgement goes back to the state or goes back?
It goes back to the states. That's also a good question. So it's all in this new system. Let's see if this link still works.
Okay.
It's so it's all there, which is really nice. I have the access in the back end to be able to edit, delete. Let's say somebody did the training in 2 different emails and now both emails are getting email, you know, they can, well, they can actually work with the state too to help with that too, but I can do a quick fix in the back end and just delete an email. But if you have any questions or issues, let me know. But yeah, the state does track it. So
what you're saying is important because, for example, I did it under my business email and then I kept getting notices that I haven't done it, even though I did it. And it took a while to figure out that it's because I wasn't using my town email address because it didn't occur to me. I felt like it was like a legal document. So I used my important email, not my throwaway town email. And then they complained that I hadn't done it.
yeah, it's they track by, I think when you first create an account, you know, you say which municipality and then you give the email and name, and that's all they're tracking, right? So you know, I was looking into it, but then the state helped. They were really quick when they said, oh yeah, you're just one person, here you go. And they were able to combine that, which is great. So it's a little odd, but that's how they track it. Another good question is that, you know, you are subject to conflict of interest law. So if you have any concerns after taking the training or reading the summary or looking at the website, you can always call the ethics line. A lot of us have all done it for one reason or another. You have to be the one to call. You can't call on behalf of somebody else. They can't call on behalf of you. It has to be you, the person who makes the call. And so they can give you an answer, and they're fantastic and really helpful. All right.
Sorry. Just quickly on conflict of interest. So if you violate the open meeting law, we can help you. Town council will help you, and if you violate the records law or make a mistake as a board member or someone sues you in your official capacity, the town can defend you. If you violate the ethics law, we cannot. It's a personal thing. So in most cases, so taking that training is the first thing they're going to ask. So if you accidentally violate, it's pretty hard to accidentally violate it, but let's say you did. The first thing they're going to ask is to take the training, and if you didn't, like you're in a lot of trouble. So it'd be very rare that you had a conflict of interest, but if you do think of something like someone gave you a gift and then you hired that person, or let's say you're on a committee and vendor you're working with is like, that's 10 grand, you're like, I can do that for 1,000, just hire me to do it. That'll get you in a significant amount of trouble. So red flags usually go off in people's heads, just call. We can say like, no, that's fine, or no, you really shouldn't do that. And most often we say you should call this number, just make sure you're okay.
And you know, if you encourage to hire an immediate family member to do something, that might also.
People do that accidentally, pretty accidentally all the time. Oh, I know a person that can do that. And it ends up being their family member. It wasn't malicious, but someone gets mad at them, well, they It doesn't happen that often, so I'm not trying to scare you, but when it does happen, it's serious.
Okay, now it's my turn.
Quick question.
Oh, yeah.
Regarding violating open meeting law, only board members violate the open meeting law, right? Member of the public can get in touch with an entire board, just to provide
Yes, because they're not on the
That's
committee.
not a violation of the
Correct.
open meeting law.
Yeah, good question.
Otherwise, you couldn't have a newspaper.
Right.
Alrighty, so again, I'm Barney Arnold and I'm the vice chair of the select board. So what I'm gonna walk you through is that sort of subset of boards that are, we've been calling independent. Typically, they're elected boards. Ryan was referring to that earlier. So and those independently elected boards often have staff. Now you can think of the planning board with the town planner or the board of health with the health agent. So if you could go ahead, one slide. So maybe I'll stand on this side, it's a little easier. So these are the specific boards, and these are the primary staff people that support them. And you know, as Ryan mentioned, the school committee is really governed under very different set of state laws. So the rest of the slides don't apply to the school committee because their authority is different.
What about Conscom, isn't that?
Excuse me?
Would Conscom be also in that? Shouldn't it be?
Yeah, you're right. There should be 6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should add that.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, and the Conscom administrator, the conservation administrator, correct. All righty. I know, I was testing.
But
I thought it was because it wasn't an elected board.
No,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. Okay, continue, please. So that's what these slides are pertaining to, that set of staff people that work for those boards. And so those particular boards are responsible for setting up the policy and of what they're going to be acting on. And, you know, it comes through the voters because the 5 are elected by by the town residents. The select board and the finance committee, though, have the authority over the town budget. And so therefore, we have a relationship with those committees in terms of resourcing those professional staff people, essentially, you know, including that in the budget, their salaries. And to enable those boards to carry out their duties. So a specific, though, a distinction it's important to remember is that those support employees are still employed by the town. And so they're still subject to the town's human resource policies and other policies about how town hall works. And so the management of all town employees, again, comes through the Mass General laws and through the voters who elect the select board. And we typically would delegate the authority to administer the management of those employees to the town administrator and the assistant town administrator, as we've talked about today. Next, please. So those independent boards, it's their responsibility to prioritize and to manage the policies of their responsibilities, right? That's not something that some other board can tell them to do or can say, you need to, you know, adopt this policy. And that includes the select board and the town administrator. So the responsibility is the independent board's responsibility to set policies and no one else's. But this middle section, which is the administration of a whole bunch of specific things that affect that employee. So their pay grade, benefits, holiday scheduling, and things that go on in their workplace, like the hours of operation. All of those policies and procedures have been developed, and as we talked about earlier, you know, they're on the website. And they are it's the responsibility of the town administrator and the assistant town administrator to manage those. That's what we have asked, we as select board have asked them to do. So another general comment here is that regardless of whether you're the support staff for an independent board or for some other department, all town employees are to be treated fairly, consistently, and with respect. And that means that they should also respect all the other employees, regardless of who reports to whom. And this comment here at the bottom about respecting the system is, for some of you who may have been involved as volunteers for a while, sometimes, and it certainly came up through the master plan process, is that in the past, we've had a tendency for what they call siloing. So a particular board kind of, has blinders on and they're only thinking about their specific responsibilities or policies. And one of the things we've done quite consciously, over the last, I would say 5 years really, is to try to change that so it's a more cooperative and considering the town's needs as a whole. So this is just describing that we want all staff to be thinking about that and be conscious of that. All right, next one, please. So this is about performance evaluation. So we didn't really talk about this at the beginning, but one of the policies that we have at Town Hall is that all employees go through an evaluation process every year. And they set goals and then they review those goals. And it's a very important part of, professional development. And we've really worked hard to implement that here in town. So, but if you are a staff person for one of those independent boards, that's not done centrally the way it is for other staff. It's done by that particular board is responsible for evaluating performance. It's a tricky situation though, because that has to be done in an open meeting. And so as a staff person, it could be tricky to have the board that this independent board that you work for evaluating you publicly, right? I mean, it's a hard thing to have it be a public meeting and they're talking about things you've done well, but then they're also talking about things you don't do well. Or things you need to improve, or somebody who is not doing the job and you're getting to where you're going to let them go. That would happen all in public. So it's difficult. And so what this is describing is that there can't be conversations outside of an open meeting for a staff person of an independent board, that only the one-on-one conversations can only happen between the chair and that staff professional. Or the chair could authorize somebody else to play that role. Another way to do this is that boards establish criteria for those evaluations in an open meeting session, and then each member of that board writes their own evaluation and submits it to the chair, and the chair takes those reports from each member and can't change them, but puts them into a summary so that it's not identified as coming from a specific member. And then that's something that has to be shared publicly. So it's a tricky situation for the staff people that work for an independent board. I'll just leave it at that. All right, next one. Is this still me? Yeah, I guess it is, huh? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so most employees outside of the school work in town hall or report to somebody that works in town hall. So this is for non-union employees. But for all non-union employees, it's very important to operate under the same rules of sort of general workplace behavior and having appropriate interactions with all staff. So this point about, a board, you may interact in a public meeting with your professional staff person and the chair likely has more interactions. But if the board is only interacting with that professional staff person maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 times a month, they may not necessarily be aware of issues around that staff person and their interaction with other staff people that might not be appropriate. So if that becomes an issue in the workplace, then the town administrator would bring it to the attention of the select board and then to the relevant chair of that independent body. And our goal as the select board is that we really are encouraging the independent boards as well as other boards to respect one another and to really try to promote that culture of all staff people, regardless of whether you work for an independent board or not, you want to encourage them all to treat people with respect and behave appropriately. Is there another? Oh, yes, work sharing and cross training. So this is a really important point that also has we've become a lot more aware of it over the last 5 years or so. Because we're a small town, but we also are residents who, expect a lot of services. And so we speaking as a select board member, we're very conscious of trying to have a pretty tight budget and not, hire people for specific, to provide specific services where we can use existing staff and be cross-trained so more than one person can do the job or provide that service. So this idea of cross-training and sharing work is very important. And it really benefits all of us here in town, as well as it helps us maintain a really tight budget, better services, more efficiency. And it's really nice for the staff people who it gives them additional skills, opportunities for staff development. So we're, as a select board representative here, we're just encouraging all the boards and committees, independent or otherwise, to really embrace this work sharing idea. And when, something comes up that really needs help from other staff people, that the answer is yes, of course, how can I help? Rather than no, that's not part of, our responsibility.
Okay.
And that's you, right? Okay, thanks. I didn't ask if anybody had any questions, but I figured you'd raise your hand if you did.
Well,
Oh, okay, sure.
and that's grand scheme there. How does the rec office back? They have staff, they're not here in the town hall, and they manage land and they have, a big program.
How is their staff person, the recreation
Commissioner works for me.
Okay.
And we interact daily. They are in a different building, but that's true of police, fire, DPW, library.
Yeah.
So that person would go through the same evaluation process that all the other staff that don't work for an independent board.
Sorry to sneak out, but we have a meeting. So.
I'll be up
Thank you so
shortly.
much. Thank you, Barney.
Sure.
So just going quickly, I know we've talked about this a lot in the last year and a half. So if there's a vacancy, if you're interested, you can submit a volunteer application form. I can send that link, or email Gretchen Gallimore. And what Gretchen does is let the boards that the person is interested in know, so they can choose to recommend or not recommend. So if the select board is the appointing authority, then they can make that decision. But so that's that process. And then resignation, make sure that the letter goes to the town clerk, and then they send it to the select board and the chair of the board or committee. And it's a mass general law, the town clerk must receive it. All right.
All right, so financial controls are extremely important to you as residents and in terms of your legal standing in town and as board and committee members. So what we ask is before you do anything financial that you just ask us. Many of you don't have financial role, but a lot of you do. You're boards and committee. So one thing we're really emphasizing here is that you don't purchase something on your own and then seek reimbursement. There's too many laws related to what we would not be able to reimburse you for us to recommend that. So many times people buy something and then they say, you know, I did this on behalf of the committee, and we have to tell them that we can't reimburse them, and we really don't like doing it. We don't want you to lose money as a volunteer. So if you ask us ahead of time, we can either use town credit card or a purchasing agreement or get pre-approval for your purchase. And then a lot of this is talking about some things that come up. So many volunteers will buy something and they don't realize that we have a tax exemption and we can't reimburse you for taxes. It's just not allowed by law. And there are rules for what needs to be submitted in an invoice because our town accountant is under very strict financial scrutiny by our auditors and the state. So if you don't have the right documentation, we also can't reimburse you. So the story here is please ask us and we'll help you purchase. We are very efficient with it. It does not take a lot of extra time. In fact, it's way less time than when we have to undo something that has been done. Next slide, please. Okay, budgets. Committee members should be aware of their budgets, and budgets aren't always in the operating budget. The Trails Committee, for example, uses CPA funds. There are many that don't show up in the general fund, and there are other committees that use revolving funds. And this has been historically used for years and years, so the boards and committees will call it their budget, and it's not necessarily a budget or one that is easily used. So we ask you to be aware of your budget as a committee and to go over it so that you understand it. The worst way to budget is to say, we asked for $1,000 last year, so this year we're going to ask for 1,000 again. It's to actually engage in what you're going to be purchasing so that we can assist you properly.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we need some more chairs upstairs. How do we get into the rooms are all closed?
Parlor room has chairs too.
Yeah, there's chairs in the parlor room.
Okay. All right, thank you.
LSC, man, so popular. All right, fiscal year too, this is important. If you cannot cross fiscal years with finance, so if you have a bill that's due June 8th and you don't pay it until July 8th, then we have to go to town meeting and ask the town to approve it at a 90% approval rate to pay that bill. It's very embarrassing. So this is a reminder to keep up with your bills. We do send out a lot of reminders about this. Do not ignore them. Do not sit on a bill either. It's much better to say, I don't know what to do with this and we'll figure it out than it is to sit on. Town meeting is really mad about those bills, by the way. Okay, turnovers. This is not to shame anybody, but there have been departments where we have found that they store money in some way in their house or something like that because it's been done that way for years. That is super illegal. Usually we work with town council, like no one's going to get in trouble unless it was intentional, but if you receive money for something, you should know how to turn it in immediately. And it's less than a week with a month at the longest. But if you're holding cash, the chances of you being accused of something go up exponentially. So cash should be turned in immediately, checks should be turned in immediately, any turnovers. If you're someone who handles money, then we're asking that you talk to us about it so we can help you. This is true of staff too. Sometimes we find that staff would wait and collect a great deal of checks, and then they turn them all in at once. This is very much frowned upon and heavily audited. People get really mad when you don't cash their checks too. We know that. That's down. Okay, just click this quickly. I'm not going to give you a class on procurement, but anytime you use town money or Carlisle money, it is subject to the procurement law. There are 3 of us in town who are experts at this. Myself, Aubrey, and Gretchen, and we don't even know all the rules. So click the chart quickly. Go down to 30B. These are all the different procurements for different things. One more. It's 3039. One more. 30B. Okay. So here's all the requirements that are required to purchase anything at any dollar amount. And as you go up in dollar amount, it gets more sophisticated. So a lot of times what happens with boards and committees is they go to town meeting and they get a grant from CPA for $50,000, and then they go hire someone to do that function. And then when they bring me the bill, I say, we can't approve that because it wasn't procured properly. And they didn't do prevailing wage, and you didn't submit it to the newspaper. And it's a nightmare to try and recreate all that and or deny a contract that's already been either promised or paid. So if you come to me ahead of time, I promise you we'll figure out how to do it. We do it all the time. So just come to me ahead of time. I want to make this purchase. We help you with your scope of services. We procure it for you properly, and then you do your thing much faster. The worst comment I hear is, but my friend said they could do this for cheaper. The Inspector General does not care for your friendship. And we have to deny it. And we've denied significant payments before and promised monies, and it's awkward for us, it's awkward for you. So just don't do it. It's there's no way around this. This is a mass general law. And if we were to violate it, we would be fired and or go to jail. Especially me. Next slide, please. If I knowingly violate that law, I can go to jail or be fined thousands of dollars. So I just won't. And people in my position do get fired for saying no for that type of thing too. So just try to make it amicable. It's you, or you want me to keep going?
I can do this part. Does anybody have any questions for Ryan first? Or it is very complex, so
Ask first is our motto.
absolutely.
And we will find a way to make it happen, no matter what you want to do. Unless we don't know about it.
Huge shift tech for the town hall meeting rooms. We've got great tech now. If you have any issues, let us know. I'm not gonna say the login here because this is going to go on YouTube. But there are different options for using this tech. So what I'm doing right now is I logged into Zoom on the TV's computer. And then I logged into my own Zoom account on here, so then I shared my screen here, so then it's just a lot easier. But we do have some other options for sharing your screen. So there's several of them. Click share is another one, which is a button, so you can just share your screen with that and use that. If all else fails, what I say is there's an HDMI cord, or there should be an HDMI cord over in this corner. You have to make all the TVs turn on with whatever you're showing in that corner. So if you ever wanted to show everything on all the TVs in this room, that is an option. It's also just, nothing else that's working. You can do that. One of the requests from the tech companies is please do not unplug anything that is already plugged in behind these TVs. That's where the damage comes in. It gets things mixed up. So however those HDMI cords and everything are plugged in, please leave those there. That's a very big request. Zoom, we have 2 Carlisle accounts to use for your public Zoom. And you can ask us for passwords again. I don't want to talk about that public meeting right now or open meeting right now because I'm going on YouTube. I know that unfortunately a lot of folks have had Zoom bombing at meetings. So there are ways to help make that not happen. One of the things is to make sure that only the host can share the screen. You can, make somebody a co-host. You can allow somebody to share their screen, but make sure when you're creating the meeting that this is a setting. What I've noticed is sometimes somebody goes, oh, I have a company Zoom account. I'll just use mine for the public meeting, no problem. And then they don't have these settings put into place. There's no staff that helps with that. And that's when anybody can come in and just share their screen, and that can be an issue. Another thing that we're looking to do in very recently is only having the location or the link for the Zoom in the agenda itself, the location there. You know how on the website, when you go to the meeting as an event, oftentimes it'll show the location, not putting the link in there. That's more the town clerk's end, but if you see that happen, if you see that pop up, just connect with her to make sure it's not there. So that can kind of help mitigate Zoom bombing. So that can really help. But that's what I did when I logged in, because the Public Body 2 is the host of this meeting tonight. And so when I logged in on my own account, I just went to myself and said, make co-hosts, so then I was able to just share my screen, no problem, and get people from this computer, so. If you ever wanna do a trial run, I'm here, Gretchen's here, Brian's here, so we're happy to help. Decide if you wanna do that. And that should help with that, I don't know, I hope that helps mitigate those issues.
Can I offer an observation?
Sure.
I haven't tested this thoroughly, but I believe if someone logged on before the person was set up, they show up as the host.
I don't think that's possible because you have to let them in. So one of the things you need to make sure is to make sure you're
Oh,
only
this is-
able to get them.
Oh, so this is without a waiting, so this,
Yeah, make sure you're enabling a waiting room, because then they can't get in until
So
you
then
actively
okay.
get them.
so
So-
disable the waiting room, first person in was the host, and the next, and then the person who set up the meeting, when I click on it, I think would become a co-host. It's just an observation, so it's not a problem.
All right, I didn't know that was possible in Zoom, so
Well, that's
a
just,
good
again, something that
observation.
no,
Yeah, so that's definitely something to consider, but just making sure that you're not allowing that to happen when
Okay,
you're
so that
setting the
can-
meeting. If you ever wanna make sure your settings are correct in a public meeting, let us know, we can take a look at that, just to make
we're
sure.
pretty high, we've got it pretty much down, but
Yeah.
your guidance is waiting room and disable screen sharing.
Yes,
That's
yes,
default. Got it.
absolutely. So if you want anybody else to share screen, that's no
Yeah, oh,
problem,
yeah, yeah.
then you
I
have
know.
that. Website guidelines, we kind of talked about the website already, if you have a staff member, they can manage that, if you don't. Back to Gretchen Gallimore, she's the webmaster, she's a little of everybody, she does a lot. A new thing that's happened in the last year is we have fobs now to get into the building, the old keys don't work anymore. So if you're the new chair and the former chair gave you their fob, please let me know, because I need to let the facilities director know for the security system. If you don't have a fob and you want one and you're the chair, let me know. You don't need to use it, it's only if you come here before, more than 15 minutes before your meeting starts. It will be unlocked 15 minutes before public meetings to make sure it stays a public meeting. Have any issues, let us know, but as long as you posted your meeting appropriately and it's on the calendar, that should be updated. If there are any issues, let's say, you get here, you wanna make it unlock earlier, this is a rare situation, so I advise not to do it. It's a little complex of how to do it step by step, basically. There are fobs to unlock and lock the building if you need to. Because your fob just lets you in, right? But if you need to unlock or lock the door, let's say, the LC meeting ends before the 10 o'clock, which is on the calendar, then they can lock the door, so then it's locked before that scheduled time. Any questions on fob? That's it.
Thank you very
So
much.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for those who joined remotely, really appreciate it. And I will be sharing this on YouTube as soon as possible, sharing the slides.